Hi, it's David Eklund, davideklund.com. Welcome to Resilient Legacy Expat Dad Coaching and the first of our culture chats in the library. Today we're going to be talking about The Culture Map by Erin Meyer. If you're going to be looking into intercultural issues, as I recommend you do as an expat dad, this is perhaps the best book to start with, in my opinion, certainly. Basically what she does is she lays out 8 dimensions along which cultures vary. So communicating, evaluating, persuading, leading, deciding, trusting, disagreeing, and scheduling. So those are the 8 dimensions. We're going to be focusing on communicating and somewhat on evaluating today. So let's take the first one first. Communicating goes from low context to high context. What does that mean? It's basically directness, how explicit or implicit one's communication style is, but it's not in an overall sense. For example, the next dimension, evaluating, talks about direct negative feedback or indirect, right? So this is just whether everything's out there, whether there's a lot in between the lines that you need to read or not. So Americans are the most low context culture. We say what we mean what we say. That's a virtue, and you better like it, right? It's just everything's out there, and we pride ourselves in that. On the other side, you have the Japanese, high context culture. There's they have a saying of reading the air. Yeah, where just the greatest subtlety is involved. The minutia that they're able to just read volumes from would just completely pass us by. Yeah? So, and there's good reasons for both of those tendencies, both of those types of communicating. For example, as an American, I have a very young culture. It's a melting pot. All the people that came together into that melting pot, they had different unspoken expectations, and they realized, hey, if we're actually going to get along, we have to make everything explicit. We have to say things out loud. And we just didn't have that long to establish things. Whereas, if you're a married couple that's been together for 50 years, just the slightest different change in expression when you ask them, well, how are you doing? Like, you're going to be able to read a book from that. And that's, in the case of the Japanese, they've had hundreds of years of more or less homogenous culture. And that lends itself to that kind of communication style where you don't need to say everything out loud. In fact, it'd be kind of weird if you had to explain everything every time, right? So, one thing that I'll just throw in here right away, you might think that if you were talking to people that were more on the world stage, more representatives of each of their cultures, let's say a top Japanese executive and a top American executive, they're going to be better able to communicate with each other. They're going to sort of return to some kind of global mean, some kind of universal human characteristics. But this is actually not the case, right? So a Japanese executive is going to speak in a more high context manner. There's going to be more riddles, more unspoken things that you just have to figure out, that you have to sort of co-create in your listening. And then the American executive is going to be more explicit, more able to craft exactly what he means into the words he's saying. And so that's something to be aware of. If you're interacting with someone, you think, wow, this is a really intelligent person. They seem very cultured, but they're more difficult to get along with, So that's something to be aware of. Another thing is you might think that a low context culture and a high context culture, like representatives of each one, that would be more difficult to deal with than someone from a high context culture and someone else from a different high context culture. But that's not the case either. 2 high context cultures are going to have a more difficult time because, again, they have different sets of unspoken expectations. So what's the tip here? The tip is make everything explicit. Okay, do the low culture, the low, the low context way of communicating consciously when you're working in an intercultural situation in business. Certainly, make that conscious. Get everybody on board with that, and then everybody will know, and that's totally workable. And it's also interesting, just as the way the world turned out. American English, being the language of the most low context culture, is often used in intercultural situations, right? Where there'll be a group of people, none of which are native English speakers, but they'll be speaking English with each other. And because language informs culture, they will start acting out in this low context way. So that's just an interesting thing that the world just happened to turn out that way. So now a little bit more about evaluating. So I'm an American in Germany, and a German will see the American who's actually even lower context than the German is. The Germans are also known for being very direct, but the German is also just as direct about negative feedback and just says what he means. And there's this sense of like, hey, I'm honest. I'm telling you what I mean. I'm not holding anything back. I'm not two-faced. I'm not backstabbing. I'm telling you exactly what I mean. And when the American gives the compliment sandwich and says, well, I like this that you're doing. I'm so excited about that. But, work on this here. But, remember that, this compliment sandwich that is kind of management 101 in America just comes off as like, is like, what's this song and dance about? Just be real. Yeah. So the tip that I want to give here is don't try to do it like them. Okay, if you're in a culture where they're giving more direct negative feedback that feels like hurtful to you and like rude and unrefined, don't try to do it like them. That is a major pitfall, and it's part of what I call the either or trap of cultural integration. It's not you don't want that. You don't want to either fit in with them or be true to yourself. No, you want to be true to yourself and make micro adjustments to fit in with them. And this book is an excellent guide for that. Global Dexterity by Andy Malinsky. Really briefly, basically says, hey, if you buy a suit, you're going to make micro adjustments. It's got to both look good as a suit and feel good on you. So in a culture, there's a zone of appropriateness, what's acceptable in that culture, and there's your personal comfort zone. And if there's any overlap, because there's ranges, right? There's any overlap, you're fine. Just find that overlap. Stay there. But if there isn't, then make micro adjustments to make the difference. So, for example, as a nice Midwesterner, if there's something I'm having a problem with at work, I can say, to assuage my Midwestern conscience, I could say, I really don't like saying this, but I've thought about this a lot. So that's being good to my Midwestern self. Excuse me. And then let them have it. But this is incorrect and needs to be fixed immediately. And then they'll say, "Oh, he's real. Oh, thank you." They really like it, right? They don't take it personally. They take it as like I'm complimenting, I'm honoring them by being forthright, right? So find those little things, and that's the way you do it. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time for a culture chat.